Well, let's head to Egypt now. The country has expressed discontent over the latest U.S. travel warning to the country, saying the notice makes a false distinction between terrorist groups and violent political organizations. Now, the U.S. advisory urges Americans to consider the risks of travel to Egypt. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ahmed Abu Zeid said that the wording of the travel advisory was dissatisfactory. He says it is unacceptable to distinguish between violent political and militants, since any group that uses violence is a terrorist one, a reference to the now outlawed Muslim Brotherhood group. Now, the advisory came just days after a series of militant attacks, including a blitz in Sinai that killed about 23 Egyptian soldiers and a stabbing attack on foreign tourists that killed 2 German women at a Red Sea resort. Now, joining us in Cairo with some perspective on this is Adel El Maroui. He's in Cairo. Of course, Adel, Egypt's government did respond quite critically to this. It called the move misleading. What exactly were their objections to this travel warning?
Well, the Egyptian Foreign Ministry said it was extremely upset, irritated actually, of the statement. One of the main points that it has critically mentioned is exactly the same point that you've mentioned, referring to violent political opposition, a reference to the Muslim Brotherhood or its supporting groups. And from an Egyptian perspective, any group, as you said, that supports or that refers to violence is considered terrorist from an Egyptian government perspective. That's one side. Also, Egypt was quite frustrated by the incidents mentioned in the travel warning that was issued this week. The Secretary of State said that terrorist attacks happened and have targeted diplomatic facilities, referring to an attack that happened several years ago, targeting a cultural center for the Italian embassy, to touristic destinations that might have been quite recent. But in any case, Egypt was quite critical because the State Department did not mention the timings of a long list of possible places in Egypt that attacks could happen based on incidents that happened years ago. So this was one of the second main point that Egypt objected to. And in the statement, the Foreign Ministry said it gives a false interpretation or a false image that these events or these attacks happened recently, which they have not.
But there are some attacks that have happened recently in Egypt. We mentioned some of them earlier. Is the government maintaining the heavy security measures we know it put in place following that 2015 attack back in Sharm el-Sheikh?
Well, Egypt is putting the best security efforts that it can, and it knows how, in touristic destinations. Just today, I've witnessed one of the seaports on the Red Sea where tourists going in for having some cruises in the Red Sea. You'd find security forces from the armed forces and the police staying in line, searching the bags of the visitors while they're going on board the boats or coming back from the sea trips, just to make sure that there are no possibility of smuggling any illegal products, specifically arms or weapons or explosive devices. That's just one example of several measures and intensified security measures that the government has been taking, mainly in touristic destinations, trying to maintain quite a safe environment there. It has been quite successful, with exception to the recent incident of the the knife attack, which the Egyptian government still has not officially said it is a terrorist organization or not. Investigations are ongoing, but the government has been quite skeptical of the nature of such attack. But again, this is an attack with a knife, which usually would be very hard to predict. Other than that, security have been quite strict. We haven't heard lately of any bomb attacks or any armed attack against with machine guns or weapons, for example, against tourist destinations. And this is what Egypt is very keen on, to maintain the security of its tourists and therefore give a sort of an image of confidence that it is safe to come and hopefully to revive the tourism industry.
Well, on that note, Adele, let's talk about the impact to the tourist sector in Egypt. The country does say the number of tourists in the first quarter of the year was up almost 50%. That's compared to last year. What really is the impact of these attacks on the tourism sector?
Well, the tourism sector has been regaining some of its strength. There are nationalities and countries who have almost resumed their operations regularly. They are not the nationalities that Egypt mostly depend on, like Russia and England, for example. But for example, Scandinavian countries are now coming as normal. China is one of the starting to be the biggest growing tourism nationality in Egypt, where, for example, one private company used to have 3 flights a week coming from China to bring tourists to Egypt. It has increased this number to 17 flights a week, an indication of how such measures are growing quite tremendously. Beside that, Egypt is still looking forward to have the regular and the main nationalities that compose most of its tourism industry. This all indicates that the recent attacks have not, in the Sinai in particular, of course, which is sort of North Sinai is quite isolated from the resort areas. And what seems to be happening is that these attacks in the North Sinai have not really significantly affected the recovery process that Egypt has been working on for its tourism sector across the Red Sea resorts.
Well, many thanks, Adele, for those insights. Adele El Maroui joining us there.